I think I'll turn the chat on just later in the presentation, so you can follow along. So the Civic Campus refers to a cluster of town administration, operations, major recreation, and partner community service facilities located generally at the southeast corner of Innisfil Beach Road and Yonge Street. This land right here. The lands deemed within the existing Civic Campus are shown in the black line in the image above on the slide there. And that contains the community service buildings, recreation, operations, yard, and it also includes a large town-owned environmentally protected feature south of the operations yard and extending to 7th line. The staff direction report linked on the Get Involved page provides another wider boundary incorporating select lands surrounded by the campus. That includes the RVH site, which is right here. The purpose of the broader boundary is not to imply any sort of future ownership by the town, but rather to signify that there's an opportunity for future collaboration with surrounding landowners and to recognize the importance of some of those lands in realizing municipally significant goals for the campus. So the campus, just stepping back a little bit or a little bit higher, the campus is located centrally within several of the town settlements and employment areas. So it's approximately a 40 to 60 minute walk, a 10 to 20 minute bike ride, or a 4 to 7 minute drive or Innisfil transit ride from each of the settlements shown in the map above: Alcona, Stroud, Innisfil Heights, Churchill, and Lefroy. Other notable landmarks nearby that we're being conscious of as we prepare this plan is the preferred RVH Health Center site, the Lovers Creek Swamp, which is this large natural heritage feature and provincially significant wetland, Centennial Park at 7th line and 10th Side Road, and the Orbit at 6th line and Alcona's boundary. Oops, slide. The Civic Campus Plan project was initiated to prepare a dynamic vision for the future of the town campus, the first of its kind, really, for the campus. The need for a master plan was identified to define and shape the campus's sense of place, maximize its potential as a community hub and placemaking destination. It's also intended to ensure the campus develops in an efficient and orderly manner and advances the best use of our limited municipal lands. It ensures servicing needs are accounted for as we plan our infrastructure. And it also ensures that valuable resources on campus are identified and preserved. Our process to date is outlined on this slide, and I'll summarize. So we started with a background research and policy review early last year. Later, we prepared a site assessment and began meeting with stakeholders on campus in late 2021. And in the past several months, we began synthesizing that feedback, the research and analysis to express the goals, opportunities, and challenges outlined in our most recent informational staff report. So we shared those preliminary results and received comments from council late last month to ensure that we are moving in the right direction. And now we're sharing our work to date with the public and continuing to refine the plan and prepare some visuals. When that work's done, we'll be circling back to the public and communicating our results to council with a revised plan for consideration. And I'd like to briefly provide a summary of our consultation to date. Do this over the next 2 slides. The first is a list of some of the stakeholders that we met with during our engagement phase between Q3 of 2021 and Q1 of 2022. The listed stakeholders here were asked to share their interests and long-term plans as they related to the campus lands. Particularly, we sought input on their aspirations for the town campus as a growing destination for our residents. Staff have also drawn extensively from existing consultation to date, collected from the Our Place Official Plan, Parks and Rec Master Plan, and Land and Lake Master Plan Update, the Community Needs Assessment, and the Town of Innisfil Cultural Master Plan. And now we also have the results from an online survey posted on the engagement platform Get Involved Innisfil. So information on the preliminary direction of the campus was provided, and a survey was made available for residents to share their preferences on the campus. This feedback will certainly be used within the next phase of plan refinement. I wanted to highlight some of the themes of that survey. The first overarching theme is that we saw a great deal of support for active transportation infrastructure. That means cycling and walking paths, better crossings, and other sort of safe route planning. We saw surprising interest from respondents in accessing the campus by bicycle. And that might be explained by the fact that there's a new multi-use pathway from Alcona and a future pathway planned from Stroud and Churchill. It's about a 20-minute bike ride from Alcona with a clear and dry path. So it was good to see how many people were supportive of, or who said that they would be interested in riding their bike to the campus. We saw support for passive recreation on campus, like walking, cycling, and hiking trails. We saw many open-ended comments regarding a desire for safe routes, affordable transportation for young people to the campus, paths connecting to key destinations like the parks, the lake, and some of our other settlements, and the need for cultural amenities. We also heard calls for seniors-focused programming. The next overarching point was many Innisfil residents are indicated that they were leaving Innisfil for some recreation opportunities. I won't go through them all, but some of the examples we heard from were good quality hiking and walking trails, tobogganing, and snowshoeing and cross-country skiing. Another overarching point was a great deal of support for outdoor amenities, paths, trails, and any sort of opportunities related to nature enjoyment, outdoor skating, picnicking, and winter activities in general were well supported by respondents. And we also asked residents to identify their preference for indoor amenity and facilities. And consistent with what we've heard for many years is there's an interest in food service, so restaurants, as well as indoor events, the campus library, which is being discussed within the library master plan, and support for a theater or other sort of cultural performance space. And our last question was, we asked residents if they would share what medical services they believe are most needed in Innisfil, and we provided an exhaustive list. So many services are needed, but there were two distinct outliers, which is access to GPs, general practitioners, and that makes sense as we grow in population. We've found that we require about one additional doctor per year based on our current growth estimates. And the second part was access to diagnostic services. So the key themes from that consultation to date, after reviewing all that information, we prepared 4 key themes. The first, there's a desire to diversify recreational opportunities on campus, particularly for year-round winter season amenities. We'd like to expand community services and advance the community hub concept espoused by the official plan. We identify opportunities for cultural infrastructure within the campus, and we recognize the economic development and community service opportunities associated with the planned Royal Victoria Health Centre South Campus. So drawing from that research, those themes and our policy reviews, we prepared 6 overarching plan goals. These goals summarize staff's proposed direction for the campus, though each goal contains sub-opportunities or sub-objectives that cover a much wider range of actions. The first is we propose space be designated on campus for professional medical offices. This is sort of medical businesses, employment supportive businesses, future institutional partners, to be developed in parallel with the Royal Victoria Health Centre South Campus in formation of a health services and employment destination. Second, we emphasize the importance of improved internal and external site connectivity improvements with a focus on active transportation and preparedness for future fixed route transit. Third, staff propose detailed design guidelines to shape the sense of place over time and to implement our vision for a prestigious and enduring institutional campus. Fifth, we propose growing the campus as a community service and cultural hub over the next decade, transforming the campus into an even more active and vibrant community destination. And sixth, we view the campus as a potential site for municipal experimentation and leadership on climate adaptation, mitigation, and sustainable development initiatives. So I'm going to take the next few slides to dig into each one of these goals and with the assistance of some visuals to help communicate the ideas behind them. So the medical employment area will take the form of an economic employment district. This is a provincial growth plan designation, which permits employment uses close outside of a settlement area and to be placed close to the Royal Victoria Health Centre, South Campus. As envisioned by planning staff, the EED, or Economic Employment District, would permit the development of a compact and walkable professional medical district on campus and augment the growth of RVH. It would incorporate employment supportive amenities and services such as convenience retail, food options, and open space enhancements supporting visitors on campus. And it would provide opportunities to seek out partnerships with public health organizations, life sciences fields, and educational institutions. The campus provides an opportunity for future fixed routes transit service with its potential employment density, recreation opportunities, and community services and events. As such, the campus will be a strong candidate for further study and piloting for higher order transit initiatives, such as regional shuttle bus service, and other fixed route alternatives. Staff are working to incorporate numerous active transportation supportive principles into the plan to ensure we can meet the goal for a pedestrian priority on campus. This includes filling out the existing current pedestrian pathway network on campus, which is quite incomplete, focusing on connecting the campus to the expanding county and town multi-use pathway network, which we'll speak about a little bit later in the presentation, incorporating the recommendations of a background accessibility report drafted following a site walk with several members of the Innisfil Accessibility Advisory Committee. So here, numerous issues were flagged by the committee members, including more attention to grade changes, obstructions on paths, improved building entrances, and better use of color contrasting to help the visually impaired navigate the space. In coordination with the RVH, we're seeking to find tailored solutions for barriers between RVH and the Civic Campus, including the opportunity and value to a pedestrian underpass at Yonge and improving an at-grade or surface connection over Yonge Street, connecting the health center to the IRC. And last, I'll highlight that we see a need for expanded pedestrian supportive amenities, more benches, shade trees, adequate lighting for winter and evening use, and bike racks. Sense of place and urban design appear frequently in our work, and I'd like to share some of the design concepts which are actively being developed, principles that are being drafted right now into the development guidelines by staff. These are broad, overarching ideas that decision makers and designers will be prompted to consider as they prepare plans for the campus. First, we're pursuing design guidelines that can support a greater sense of place, a memorability and distinctiveness on campus. We're focusing in on guidelines that convey a sense of pride, optimism, and durability or endurance in our buildings, landscapes, and infrastructure. Second, we're incorporating a wellness by design focus. Wellness by design refers to supporting active lifestyles through a gentle prod towards active transportation. Among other approaches, it endorses compact design, pedestrian supportive infrastructure, and a playful interventions in public space that gets us active. Just last Friday, staff held a kickoff meeting along with RVH design team with the chronic disease prevention professionals at the Simcoe Muskoka District Health Unit, who are experts in healthy community design. Third, we seek to create public spaces which make active modes of transportation easier and preferable on campus. By providing direct routes, good signage, and well-placed parking, we can help ensure the choice to walk or roll across campus is an easy one to make. Fourth, We're attempting to diversify landscapes on campus. We suggest that with more and more activity on campus and a growing list of reasons to visit, we'll need to find ways to get more and more day-to-day benefit out of smaller park spaces and areas between buildings to support those seeking to get outside throughout the day for fresh air, or those who wish to take a work conversation outdoors on a clear day. For example, not all open spaces will be compact. I'll note that we'll still be protecting space for a few large format open park areas, or traditional park areas. Fifth, on public safety, we must ensure that the campus is safe and welcoming during a wider range of times of day and season. We're encouraging this through concepts like transparent buildings, which is like more glass and more doors at ground level, and more active uses on the floor, like putting a meeting space right at ground level where it's going to be used most, and we have more eyes on public space. We're also going to be incorporating CEPTED principles, crime prevention through environmental design, and placemaking as a strategy to make places more lively and therefore safer. Last, compactness and density, as we've been describing, while bringing many benefits to visitors on the campus, can also bring an undesirable overlap of uses. Design guidance can ensure that the most actively used parts of the campus, and even within individual buildings, that those elements can be turned away from those that need to be quieter, less public, and more inwardly focused. And last, we always strive as staff to consider the experimental spirit of destination placemaking. Staff propose the use of unconventional approaches to activate public space through the arts for all our buildings, landscapes, and infrastructure. Because sometimes small change in our public space can turn a mundane place into somewhere that you're reminded to return again with a friend or with family. Goal 4. Staff are advancing an emphasis on conservation-based recreation within existing environmentally protected zone lands within and around the campus. So I've shown here in this diagram an excerpt of the campus land use plan showing the green areas where some of these ideas could be put into play. Conservation-based recreation refers to a land stewardship and passive recreation strategy for land, perhaps similar to what you might see in other conservation areas in some municipalities. So we propose partnerships and agreements as tools that can be explored with adjacent landowners to coordinate improved public access to a larger network of paths, but also resources to protect important natural heritage features and outdoor education opportunities. Though such an idea is outside the scope of a campus master plan, we're inspired here by the opportunity over time for a network of conservation-based parks in Innisfil, connecting our settlements perhaps. And we're hopeful that by 2051, which is the furthest horizon of this plan, maybe this is something that we'll be excited to work towards. So other recreation enhancements that we're considering for the campus include ways to support winter recreation on campus. And primarily that's through seasonal use of a trail network for snowshoeing or cross-country skiing, tobogganing on campus, and access to winterized washroom and change facilities to support these kinds of activities. As I mentioned earlier, there's also land set aside for a larger traditional open park space on campus. And at this point, staff have been working with the Rotary Club, who have in years past developed plans for an extensive trail network through the environmentally protected lands south of the operations yard. They've been a good partner. Goal 5. We seek to expand community service and cultural facilities on campus, growing the campus as a key community hub. The town campus is envisioned as a place of continuous activity, small and large gatherings, employment, and community and health service related visits. This change is going to take place over time, although through employment density going up incrementally, new public facilities like libraries and multi-use community rooms being discussed in this plan and the library master plan, new recreational assets, like those I just discussed, and access to expanded medical services and employment on campus. So what's important with this concept is that we strive to be as inclusive as we can of different reasons to be on campus, and we strive to find solutions for making these pieces fit together. So there's also cultural heritage opportunities built right into the campus. As a former Innisfil settlement, the village of Barclay, the location of the campus is the former location of the village of Barclay. And it was once home to prominent individuals, including members of the Barclay family, a heritage designation, sort of agricultural homestead, and other historic landmarks, including the Innisfil post office, one of the, I believe, the original Innisfil post office. So we've begun to work through some of these opportunities to preserve these resources as the campus evolves, in collaboration with the Innisfil Heritage Advisory Committee. And it continues to be a very rich area to explore. So I think we have some questions about heritage conservation at the end there. So we'll circle back and talk about what that might look like at the end. All right, and then the last goal is goal 6. So the community strategic plan, which is the 2020 to 2030 plan, describes an ambitious path for this community, which is just described by the pursuit of balance between human growth and prosperity and the recognition of some of the limits of our natural environment. So in that spirit, we envision the campus as a focal point for bold municipal sustainability, with potential interventions ranging from district energy, microgrids, sustainable energy production, salt use reduction, low impact development, certified infrastructure and building performance standards like LEED and others, and sustainable waste management practices. So I think what you should anticipate seeing in a final plan as we continue to develop it is seeing recommendations to significantly expand shade through tree urban forest on campus, us finding ways to reduce unshaded surface parking areas, creating public spaces that are designed to be more responsive to warmer temperatures and more frequent heat events, precipitation, and designing infrastructure that's easier to maintain for our operations staff so that we can use it throughout the year. These are some of the approaches that are being considered right now in the plan, and I think will be action through the plan as well as action through the Integrated Sustainability Master Plan, which is a concurrent master plan taking place with the town. So that concludes the summary of the plan goals, and I wanted to touch quickly on several of the figures which are attached in that latest report before we address some of the questions and comments. So this first slide provides an overarching land use plan, a draft land use plan, I should say, for the campus. And I'll highlight a few of the points for anyone who's sort of more of a visual learner, and that would be helpful. So in red, the land selected here, these are the RVH, the preferred RVH site. In blue, or sort of a purpley blue, these are the lands we envision for the economic employment district. This is the medical district and some of the supportive retail uses. In pink, along Innisfil Beach Road and down here, these are community service oriented uses, like town hall. We have the South Simcoe Police. We have our Kemptville Bay School, in services and in power. And then in green, these are lands containing key natural heritage features in darker green, as well as provincially significant wetlands. And they're generally zoned environmental protection. And then in light green, we have some recreational areas. And then last in brown, we've shown the town operations yard and lands that we were examining early on for suitability for some additional operations needs. Okay, so next we show a roadways map. And this shows our preference for using existing roadway alignments So those are shown in thicker and in darker red. These are existing internal roadways connecting to county roads, which aren't actually indicated in this diagram. And then we also show two smaller internal roadways. And these are roadways proposed schematically. They're definitely going to change, but just to show where we would provide additional connectivity for vehicles, accessible parking and parking lot access, which would be new road construction on the campus. And I'll note that within this schematic, although we're using existing roadways, it's likely that we're going to need some slight realignments of the roadways, some widening, in particular where it connects with county roads, and to implement some of the complete streets policies of the town. And then our last figure is the proposed modified grid of pathways on campus. So what we try to do with this schematic layout of where we'd like paths to connect is to create a grid, a rough grid over the campus, which allows for ease of movement and ease of navigating, especially when it's dark and winter conditions or later in the evening. And I'll highlight that there's three classes of pathways shown. In really dark, almost black here, these are the county multi-use pathways. Segments here, I believe, are already constructed, and this north-south segment is proposed. And then in this dark red, this is what we have described in our work as the tier 1 walkways. These are wider, formal pathways that preserve certain view sheds, sort of attractive views across campus, and they're intended to capture the bulk of foot traffic on campus. And then in light blue, we have, I believe we refer to them as just generally they're multi-use pathways. They're 2-meter wide asphalt pathways. And these are, this segment here is already existing, connects right about there. And we're talking about expanding it to create those cross-campus connections for cyclists and pedestrians. And what's not shown on here are those standard 1.5-meter wide sidewalks that every neighborhood has and every development has. These are the sidewalks that we typically use to connect to buildings and open spaces and service areas. And those will certainly be shown as more detailed plans are prepared at the block and site level. Okay, so that concludes our summary of our work to date, as contained in that detailed report provided on Get Involved. So at this time, I'd like to pivot directly into some of the questions that were submitted by registrants to this virtual open house. There were 6 questions in total, and 2 of them were related. So I'm just going to jump into those before we get to the open section of the open house. So I'm going to try to address it. And I think what I'll do is I'll try to give the chance for the person who asked the question just to respond. If there's, if we got the question phrased properly, or we interpreted it correctly, or if they're satisfied generally. So require me to just juggle my screens. So the first question is, when will the GO train be coming to Innisfil? And when is the orbit planned and its status? And then the last point is, when will the amenities start to come about? And for that, those first 2 questions, I'll turn to Mary Nordstrom to provide a response.
Thanks, Galen. Yeah, so the GO station, the GO train station, it's under planning, going through planning and design right now. And we expect that the station will be operational around 2025, 2026, next 3 to 4 years. There is a report that we will be bringing to council as an update on the status of the orbit, likely at the end of this month, April 27th. And included in that report will be the preliminary design for the station. So things are moving on track, pardon the pun, with the GO station. And in that report as well, there'll be an update on the secondary plan team that has started work on establishing a long-term land use plan, secondary plan called the Orbit Potential and Innovation Plan that will establish the land use policies for the orbit over the next 30 years. So that's in terms of an update on the orbit, and I'll turn back to Galen for the amenities on the campus plan.
Sure. So there's no detailed timing yet, though it's likely that it's going to be something that we will be preparing in the next few weeks in terms of recommendations on the phase development of specific amenities. There's kind of a two-part perspective to keep in mind. I think there are some projects that could certainly happen sooner than later. We'll be talking about taking some first steps within maybe 2 to 5 years. And that's going to focus on things like pedestrian gaps in, pathway gaps around campus, and maybe some vehicle connectivity improvements. So, fixing a certain segment of the roadway to be ready for the next phase. Let's say, maybe it's the library or something. Actually, the library is an interesting point. I don't have a specific date for the library, but I know that planning work could happen sooner than later. So starting to talk, the library talking about, how they want that facility to be designed, and consulting potentially more on that. And then I can say with certainty that some of the land development elements of the master plan, especially related to the economic employment district, we'll be undertaking that sooner than later with the support of council. So looking at some of the commercial land needs, which are actually scheduled to schedule a project later this summer. And then hopefully looking at some of the market feasibility for medical office within this region, and just how that ties in with the influence of RDH. And the other point I wanted to emphasize is master plans, we're typically asked to look well out into the future. And right now, a lot of the master plans are looking at 2051 as the furthest horizon. So when it comes to some of the bigger changes on campus, such as the full build out of the economic employment district, or like getting higher order transit or something along those lines, we're really talking about some of those things coming to fruition much later, like 20 years down the road, potentially. But the master plan lays out those sort of a logical step towards some of those decisions being made. And then I said I was going to try to ask if that person, this was from Karen H. Is Karen H here? Could she raise her hand? Sometimes people submit questions and they're not able to join. So I just wanted to see.
Galen, looks like Karen H is not here.
Is not here. Okay, so we'll move on, but we'll move on to the next question. If they're listening or they hear this later, they can always reach out to me directly. The second and third question, we had two questions related to Barclay and its history. So that's the Barclay homestead and the family that lived there. They ask, how will Barclay's history be incorporated into plans for the campus, and how will you honor the Barclay history? So I had a really good discussion with part one of the request for this comment and question was it was Deb Crawford who spoke last week and talked through some potential ideas. I have a two-part answer. The first thing I want to say is there's several potential themes associated with the Barclay settlement and the former structures, the homestead structure and the barn. There's themes that we can explore as we talk about celebrating the sort of that history. The first is that it's the site of the first Innisfil post office, which is related to Innisfil's earliest settlement. The second is that there's an opportunity to talk about the Barclay family, and there's a number of prominent individuals there. The third is that there's an opportunity to celebrate rural and agricultural landscapes, as well as architecture, the barn or the homestead architecture. And fourth, there's an opportunity to talk about the agricultural economy in general in the history of Innisfil and food production. So specifically to talk about how the Barclay family can be honored, at the recommendation of the Innisfil Heritage Advisory Committee, we're looking at opportunities to include the reuse of the Barclay homestead stones many of which were gathered following the demolition or the fire and then the demolition of that homestead. So for anyone who's not familiar with the Barclay home, it was a beautiful fieldstone structure which burnt down, I believe, in 2014, if I'm not mistaken. And we have quite a few photographs of it, and there's a prominent family, the Barclays, that was connected to the structure and the land. So regarding the use of those stones, which I think will be a core piece of how we honor this history, there were some early ideas discussed between capital engineering staff and members of the Heritage Committee and planning. So we were talking about fieldstone walls, sort of like a Celtic fieldstone wall. We talked about reusing it with cladding on buildings, or using it within a prominent retaining wall, for example. And I think the idea there is that there's some good ideas, but there's ideas that don't as fully or impactfully celebrate that history. So again, at the recommendation of the Innisfil Heritage Advisory Committee, we see a more distinguished use of those stones within an outdoor amenity space located in proximity to the original building's location and connected to a prominent open space. So at this point, what we're looking at is it'll take the form of a detailed recommendation for their reuse within that large open space, like a quad in the employment district. And I'll leave it there because I think we'll invite Deborah to comment a bit more on the comment. And then one other motif or concept that was raised was as a potential to honor that history was the use of the Barclay home footprint of the building as a landscape design motif within that large open space. So this could take the form of like a gently elevated landscaped area showing the footprint of the building and used for passive recreation and maybe with some interpretive signage. So it's concepts like that. I don't want to go on too much here, but there's several other like interesting ideas that are non-physical. So one precedent we were really inspired by was an example in the EU where they were excavating a site and they invited school, several classes to come and watch the work and understand the history of the site. Thought, well, there's an opportunity to do that potentially as we disturb the remainder of that Barclay site and need to do that archaeological assessment. And then we also have plans like the placemaking plan and public art policy and our culture master plan coming up. And there's an opportunity there for sort of themed calls for works related to heritage themes. And I think those could be well integrated within the master plan. So part of our work will be expressing some of these ideas, some in really explicit ways around reuse of materials, and other ideas that will sort of be gently suggesting, when we implement this, we can do it in a creative way and build additional value and learnings. So I'll turn to, I know it was Deb Crawford, and I believe it was June Chambers. I think I'll just offer you both the chance to follow up with that. I'll just unmute those. Max, perhaps you could unmute or ask to unmute June Chambers.
I'm working on it here. Perfect. June and Deb are both unmuted, Gil.
Okay, nice. Yeah, I just thought I just wanted to provide you with an opportunity to respond, or if there's anything else you wanted to add or clarify.
Well, I'm June Chambers. My husband David and I live in Bond Head, and we were very closely connected with the Barclay House from 1968 to 1982. We operated a tea room and craft shop there, and we promoted the Barclay history. The Barclays loaned us some of their memorabilia and photos that we put on the walls, and we had many visitors that were really interested in the Barclay family and what they had achieved in the community. how they use the field, the big field to the south, to grow their wheat. And there's just so much richness in the Barclay story. It's great to write about it, and I think probably local people know it well, but probably people living outside the community would not have heard of the Barclays. I feel really heartened by what I've heard, because I think initially we were concerned that the historical aspect would just kind of slip away. And yes, I think those stones, you might just think that they're just a pile of stones, but those stones were dug up, they're granite, they were dug up from the fields, and they were used to build the Barclay House. And I think that they will play an important part in some of your plans. But I really feel optimistic, and I've contacted several people that I know that are very much involved in the arts community in South Simcoe. And I think one of them for sure, I know, is listening tonight, and I think she's very excited.
That's great. Thanks for the context on that. Are some of those resources, in terms of, you mentioned photos and historical documents connected to the building, are those still available?
We have some copies that we used, but I think they're the Barclays. There are a lot of people that have generations of Barclays I think are around, and I think if you put the call out, I think you might get some good response there. Because what we have are just copies.
Yeah.
We wouldn't have wanted to use original material. There's a couple of posters that are particularly interesting because you can learn so much by a poster. One was the poster that Francis Barclay, when he and his family, his wife Agnes, and their 9 children were leaving Dumfriesshire in Scotland. It was a poster advertising an auction they were having of the animals and the farm equipment and some furniture. And it's really interesting to read the type of animals and the words they used, because their vocabulary was a little different than ours. Like a peremptory roup. That was what this was called. It was a final auction sale. And it's details like that from old posters, and what we have is just a reproduction. And the other piece is also interesting. It's when the Barclays gave up their farm, and it was a poster for that. So those two things you can learn a lot. And I think there's a page from a Bible.
Yes. I think the reason I ask is, with the master plan, a lot of it is just thinking about the steps you want to take to creating something that's much bigger. And, how we go about constructing a new landscape on campus, this large open space, and with connecting these stone structure and trying to connect the story of the Barclay family. I think what's key is how we frame how we get to that landscape, and what steps are needed. And I guess to make that a little less ambiguous, I'll say that there's 2 really interesting projects that are actually scheduled up for the next 2 years that I'll share with everybody. There's part of this is information coming into us, and part of this is information going out to everyone else. There's Plan 51. That's a cultural heritage landscape study, and I believe that's scheduled for next year at some point. And my understanding of cultural heritage landscapes is it's looking at some of the prominent Innisfil, characteristically Innisfil landscapes that we have. So hedgerows, barns, agricultural viewscapes that they're exceptional ones on the RVH site, and I know the designers there are keenly aware of some of those concepts. And the next plan that I think is maybe of interest is the Plan 65, which is the Agricultural and Rural Area Placemaking Implementation Plan, which is 2023 as well, if I'm not mistaken. And that talks about how essentially coming up with a plan to creatively celebrate some of the rural history and agricultural history. There's sort of agritourism bend to it. There's a cultural history bend to it. But I think those are two plans that are coming up, which we're going to have to put some thought into. And having some of our ducks in a row around, why we care about Barkley, the Barkley family, and the Barkley property are, I think there's a nice consistency in the next couple of years around this concept. So I'm sure we'll be in touch, surely with Deborah Crawford, but also with yourself.
That's great.
Yeah, thank you.
That's good.
So Galen, it is Deb Crawford. I just want to chime in. Thank you for taking the time last week to talk about the Barkleys and how the Heritage Committee is pretty passionate about that site and our hope, I guess, for that pile of stones that is in the operations yard. I'm sure the folks, the operations people in the town of Innisfil would love to get rid of that pile of stone, but they're going to have to hang on for a few years, I hope. Just one of the things, sort of from looking at the stones, a lot of the facade of the Barkley house was a cut stone. So it wasn't all, it was a cut so that it was fitting in there. And those stones are still in the, obviously in the pile in the operations yard, and hopefully can be used for something creative. And I just think it's an opportunity that we have to meld sort of the history and that part of Innisfil as we move into the future. When I think, 2050 and you look back to when the Barkleys were first trying to make it through the first winter in 1849 when they first came to Innisfil. So it's a long story, and as long as we can build in some remembrances of where we've been in the past, I think it helps us create where we want to be. And all the studies say that becomes an integral in having a sense of home. So I am really pleased with some of the things that are being suggested. And from a broader look at it, it's an exciting opportunity for Innisfil, the whole campus, and bringing the employment lands together, and art and music, and it's exciting. I may not live that long, and I may not live that long here, but it's exciting. So thank you for that.
Perfect. Yeah, no, one point you made last day, and I think I tried to touch upon it, was there are some ideas which really distinguish and honor the history, and there's some ideas which just less so do it. So I think we'll have to be conscious in how we talk about what we want for those stones, and we'll certainly try to incorporate some of the enthusiasm and some of that energy.
Yeah,
Thank
and thank you, Deborah and June, for your input. And we agree this is a really exciting time, and we're bringing together this true community hub at these important intersections. So looking backwards and forwards at the same time. So thanks for those questions. And I just thought maybe now's a good opportunity. We do have a couple more pre-submitted questions, but maybe we can sort of break from the script and ask if anyone in our sort of virtual open house has a question they want to put in the chat, or raise their hand, and we can unmute and hear from you. And then we can return to some of the pre-submitted questions following that. So if anyone would like to speak, please put up your hand or put your question in the chat.
I can confirm chat. We're allowed to chat. There's the settings set, right? So.
And just if anyone's on the call and they're not sure how to raise their hand, It is under the reactions. There you go. Thank you. It's under the reactions and raise hand. We do have a question in the chat. How will we meet the parking needs of the growing community and community amenities planned for this space? So thank you, Karen, for your question. I can provide a response to that. Parking is one aspect that we're looking at. As you know, we're looking at the accesses to the site from all modes of transportation, certainly encouraging, as we've heard, the desire for some more active transportation connection. But certainly as we look to parking, the question about underground parking or building parking into a building, into the lower level of the building, or creating amenity space above a parking structure, are all things that we're looking into, recognizing that, yeah, the parking requirements need to be met, and there's that is certainly, but how the design of that parking and where it's incorporated is part of what's going to be informing our design guidelines as part of the Civic Campus. But certainly, yes, accommodating for parking, for loading, for movement through the campus in a vehicle, as well as other modes of transportation, are all key points of the Civic Master Plan.
I could add one small point, something that I think this is going to come out in the subsequent sort of market analysis and land sort of economic feasibility component of our assessment, will be what the values of the land might be. Because the question of whether underground parking is possible or structured, or variants of or mixes of various solutions, often comes down to the value of that land. And what I'd say is we're trying to build compactly. We're trying to promote compact development, and that tends to, through allowing people to get the most out of smaller lots. Can make it economically viable, but we won't know for sure until we start looking at that market study. The other point I want to add is I think there's a real opportunity for shared parking on campus. We have, I don't know the exact number, like 300 on the south of IRC and 295 on the top, and probably another 100 at Town Hall. And I think if we will be recommending a more detailed evaluation of parking utilization on campus. And that's the first step to figuring out, how much are we actually using? And then I think the next step is looking at how visitors coming to offices midday might not need duplicated parking when we have facilities that are designed for evening activity, like a conference space or like a community center that's booked in the evenings. So we can account for that, and we can lower the overall parking requirement, and it's going to make it fit a lot nicer. That said, we've looked at the full-on parking requirements. It fits. Every solution that we add that takes a little bit more out and makes it more realistic, it just makes it better, because we can put better landscaping in, better roads, better paths. So second long-winded response. I'll move on. If there's any other questions, or I can jump back.
Go ahead,
Councillor
Councillor
Van Berkel.
Berkel.
1 second,
You're on
Councillor Van
mute.
Berkel. Let me just make sure you can unmute yourself.
Okay, thank you.
Perfect.
I was just wondering, because we are growing in leaps and bounds in this film, especially over the next 20 or 30 years with the orbit and everything coming on and the hospital coming. Have we taken into consideration the expansion of our existing buildings, such as a police station? I'm sure it's going to have to grow before long. Likely the rec center, where we may need more ice, even the Risardo Center, all of these buildings. Have we taken that into consideration in the campus on the overall plot?
Yeah, so we certainly are, part of that is looking at the town hall expansions, IRC expansions for more ice pads. That's all being, this is 30 years. So we're not just planning for today's population, we're planning for the doubling of our Innisfil's population over the 30 years and the needs of that community as it grows. So that is being factored into sort of the space planning and sort of and anticipated servicing needs for those the expansion of services. So yes, we are looking into that.
Yeah, and on the topic of the South Simcoe Police, we've met with the chief a few times, and I believe Max was at least couple times. And in both cases, they said, we're here for now and for the reasonable long term. And one key thing that we're looking for is space for some of our police vehicles. So we're looking at assigning some sort of a secure area just east of the police station. So it'll be sort of a security and blanking on the term. I don't have
Secured parking lot.
The secured parking lot
Yeah.
is what they've requested, and we've made space for that. And then quickly on the IRC, we are waiting for the facilities master plan to take place, which is going to be able to talk more about how individual facilities should be expanded. With the land and lake master plan, they're talking more about the field needs. So they've said we're going to need more rink space. So I said, perfect, we have the IRC. Maybe that's a building that could be expanded, and we sort of assigned conceptually some space that just east of the building. But we're waiting for that facilities master plan for them to make that determination and decide within the context of the town where those rink spaces is best placed.
Okay, so we can move back to one of the pre-submitted questions. But if you do have a question, just go ahead and put it in the chat, and when we're done with this, we can speak to that question or comment that you put in the chat.
Okay, the next question that was submitted was, I believe it, let me pull up my notes here. This was from a Mr. Justin K. He asked, is the boundary for the town Civic Campus Master Plan subject to alterations or changes? So I think I have a part answer for that, but I just wanted to open it up to him just to clarify if he could, maybe a bit more context around this question. So if someone could help Justin K. unmute himself.
Okay, thank you. Can you hear me?
I hear you just fine. Yep.
Okay, great. No, thank you for the presentation so far. The reason for the question is just that I represent a landowner that owns part of the future proposed expansion area land and then adjacent to it as well. So I was just curious as to what the process was, if there was any changes that may be proposed, or you mentioned working with adjacent landowners in the future. So definitely wanted to just touch base on that if I can.
Okay, yeah, sure. So Mary, I'll jump in. I see this as a two-pointed kind of question. When it comes to boundaries on campus, there's quite a few boundaries happening. The first one is that overarching boundary with the black line and the dotted line. I think it's important to understand for the purposes of this master plan, and this is more for everyone, is that boundary doesn't really exist in a legal or regulatory sense. It's really just for us to delineate for the purposes of communicating the potential for change for residents today, but also residents of, in 10 years from now. Some of the potential projects that could take place, or different ways to think about land around the campus. And it shows lands that we as planning staff believe could contribute in one way or another to the campus as a destination. So that one is the most flexible. It's probably going to shrink or get adjusted or expand as more is known about individual projects. So, between now and the final version of the plan in the next few weeks, or losing track of time, it's definitely possible to be adjusted for one reason or another. And I'll also say, as a master plan, it can be revised and updated at any time, really. Although as staff, we're going to probably be suggesting that we come back to the plan periodically, maybe every 5 or 10 years, to say, okay, where are we at? Are we any closer to our goals? Have our goals changed? How do we need to think about the campus as a whole? Now, the next point I'd want to make about boundaries on the campus, and I think this is more what you're getting at, is there are areas that are zoned and an official plan designated for development, and there's some that are not as permissive, right? So areas such as the employment district are only really made possible through the support of changes to that official plan, land use designation and zoning. But that demands support by the Minister of Municipal Affairs. So I mentioned that the Economic Employment District is a growth plan designation. It's like a provincial idea that we can have employment outside of settlement areas. So as part of the campus plan, we're thinking about what we want to happen in different portions of the campus. We're focusing on the EED, that employment area specifically. And we're going to be trying to make recommendations to bring about those changes. So we're going to be saying things like, this is the kind of uses that we want to see. This is the amount of area that we might need to achieve our goals. And this is maybe the best place where we want to put it. So based on the information that we've gathered so far, like, we have a rough estimate of what the office space needs are for a hospital and a community of this size. And therefore, we have a rough estimate of overall land needs for some of these areas. So again, through that market evaluation, some of those numbers are going to be more refined. And when we have that information, there's going to be future conversations with the county of Simcoe, because the county of Simcoe is sort of the broker between what the town is doing and what the province wants, and that conversation. So there might be an opportunity to talk about what that looks like, but what it comes down to is the argument that the town is making is having a clear understanding of what's needed on campus. And I think I'm rambling at this point, but working with that, but we might see that evolve over time. Like, maybe in 5 years, we come back and we say, we've built twice as fast as we thought, or 10 years, twice as fast as we thought. And then we would be starting to talk about, okay, the EED is successful. Let's grow, kind of thing. So yeah, anyway, there's two formulations there. It's the boundaries and the designation boundaries.
I think, Galen, no, you did an awesome job answering the question about boundaries within and around. And I just add, yeah, so we tend to think of boundaries and designations. So this master plan is setting that vision in place that says we would like, we think there's merit to exploring this market feasibility study for this economic employment district. And if that's successful, and those conversations with the county and the province are successful in delineating that economic employment district, then comes the Planning Act applications, the official plan designation changes that all would go through that secondary plan, or would all go through that Planning Act public planning process. This isn't setting those boundaries. That will come after following that market feasibility study, when we understand what those boundaries should be. And then in conversations with the province and the county, then we'll follow the Planning Act applications that will set land use designations. So just by that, Justin. Justin, did you have any other questions?
No. Thank you. Thank you for the thorough response. I appreciate it from both of you.
Most welcome. And I think we have another question in the chat about wanting to hear more about the preservation of green spaces on the campus lands.
Okay.
There's a
Um,
slide.
yeah.
Want to go back to, but certainly that was it's one of the pillars of the Civic Campus.
I think I have a couple thoughts to share, and if there's a particular slide we could go back to, I can do that. But I think there's two, maybe three things happening within the master plan around the preservation of green space. We have a piece of land that was historically an agricultural field, and then we have portions of the land which were probably touched at some point, but at this current point are considered natural heritage, and they have special protections under the LSPP, and they have special protections under provincial regulations. We relate to those spaces and the transition between them, as I said, are just in three ways. The first is through urban design guidance as we develop on campus. So as we prepare those urban design guidelines, our approach generally is to take the policies of the LSPP, which generally call for setbacks from those features. And we're trying to think about how we can prescribe how that 30 meters or 15 or whatever amount it needs to be set back, how that's actually going to be constructed and used. And one of the concepts that we have in our guidelines, and I actually believe in the RDH, that they're also working through some of these concepts, is creating a transition to those spaces. And historically, what's done, certainly in the private development sector and sometimes in the municipal sector, is we look at it and we say, okay, we need 30 meters, and we create sort of a wasteland between it, it's yard and whatnot. And what we're pushing is, what if we added value to those features by creating a bit of a transition? What if we replanted in a naturalized way and we set it aside rather than sodding straight through? And what we suggest is, once we take that mindset and we build that into the projects and our expectations, is we're moving more towards a stewardship approach on behalf of the town, to enhancing rather than detracting from. So that's like one approach that we're taking, is looking at those guidelines to create those really effective transitions that both work for people, but also work for creating ecological value. The other part is being really clear that we're not going to touch those features. Where we have protected features, there needs to be really clear guidelines around. These are just no-go zones. We're going to, first and foremost, trying to find a solution where we adjust rather than a feature is adjusted and we cut, we're forced to cut features, or we make a justification to cut features. So that's another element that we're emphasizing. And then I think just generally on, the concept of preserving green space. And this is kind of related to those first 2 points, is by setting out guidelines and policies around how we develop on campus, we can better account for the budget for projects that are required to create better outcomes. So one of the big effects of development on natural spaces, it comes from stormwater management. How we control water released from a site when we have a lot of permeable area like parking lots. There's a lot of different strategies that we can use that can create really attractive green spaces, attractive stormwater facilities that we can use, and more effective stormwater facilities, but they tend to cost a bit more money to do that. And part of the argument we're going to be trying to make through this master plan, in partnership with some of the integrated sustainability master plan work that's going on, is making a case for that investment. And when we talk about the campus as a laboratory for experimentation of these technologies, it's about making the case for a greater investment in some of these approaches, and that'll create better outcomes. So I'd highlight those 3 points. I'm not sure if we wanted to Karen the opportunity to unmute.
I just put it in the chat. Thank you very much. It's good to hear. I really appreciate the work and investment that's going to be needed to make sure that things are sustainable into the future and that we're protecting the environment. So that's great.
So much.
Okay, I don't see any further questions in the chat, Galen, so we can move to
Sure. So this was a question we received from, I'm just going to scroll up here. I think it was Chad E. If someone wants to unmute him. So I'll just jump into the comment. Like, I think there's many changes proposed on campus. Some are big, some are small. I think for any given project or set of projects, capital engineering staff themselves will need to prepare a construction management plan. That work probably won't be, we might be talking about certain guidelines for that to happen. But we also, I believe, have standards under our engineering standards to manage some of those impact, like managing traffic or safe entrances, and just to keep the day-to-day operations of businesses running smoothly. I'll also say that with essential services on campus, like the police service and town hall and the health center, we're going to be forced to find solutions that don't fundamentally disrupt the campus. And then lastly, just specifically about the YMCA and the IRC, YMCA and the IRC, I think we're in a really good position to not disrupt business within that building. For the main reason being that we have 3 entrances that all lead to it. So any sort of disruption to those entrances, I think we can potentially accommodate flow of traffic. And we also have parking and building entrances on 2 sides, 2 or more sides, and there's like secondary entrance there. So that lends it well to sort of managing traffic impacts, and I think that would be a good outcome in terms of managing that. Yeah, if you have any other comments or clarification. Not hearing any.
we have a question, Galen, in the chat. Chat said thank you. It doesn't have to be your last question, Karen, but the question is the Innisfil Library and Idea Lab, the Lakeshore branch, going to stay where it is and a new location at the new campus, or will it be moved there? Hoping it's an addition and not a move.
Is anyone from the library here tonight? I've spoken for you guys once. I don't want to do it again. I don't know specifically. Like, I know in my reviewing the library master plan materials, it suggested to me, oh, it looks like I've got a message here. No reps here tonight from them. It looked to me like there was sort of like a follow-up process in terms of talking about the fit out for certain facilities. I don't think there's, I would be really surprised if they were talking about removing that from Alcona. Like, it's sort of a custom fit.
And again, to the point of we're building for the population, like today,
Yeah.
and the population that's coming, there will be, these are needs that will need to grow. These are services that will need to grow alongside our growing town. So we see it as an addition and a placeholder for that addition to the campus, and as part of that sort of cultural community hub.
Yeah, I love the branch too. I think it's, we're told what kind of space requirements we should be anticipating. So I don't know the details, but you might, if you're worried about it or you want to get clarification, there is the library master plan team, and I'm not sure who exactly is the best contact to confirm that with. I kind of want to say, I shouldn't even say, I'm not sure who it would be. I want to say Susan Bowes is someone who's closely working with the master plan.
And the library master plan, there's a presentation at council on Wednesday night regarding the library master plan. So stay tuned.
Good question. Stumped fully stumped us. Oh, and then this was a question from Karen Forgraven. I think we touched upon it. Actually, no, we didn't talk about bike paths to other areas in Innisfil. I mean, I did. I'll just reiterate that the county is talking about multi-use pathways, one of which is Barrie to Bradford. And that's over I'm not sure when the end line of that project is, but if that's in the plans, and it goes right by town campus. And I believe there's also a project for IBR and Young to Innisfil Heights. That was originally on the books at one point. So these are described in the Transportation Master Plan. And I actually understand that these plans are being updated right now as we speak, the Trails Master Plan specifically. So there might also be an opportunity to weigh on cycling infrastructure, if that's of interest to you. And then within the campus, we're certainly trying to connect to those points. Haven't quite fleshed out exactly where those best connection points are, but it's all about giving people the option to bike from Stroud on a nice day, or bike from Alcona and visit the library. Or okay. Looks like we've got another comment.
So John would like to speak, so we will unmute you, John.
Hi, can you hear me?
We can.
Okay, hi. It's been a while. Been watching the ball game, 2-0 Jays. But I'd like to talk about the whole campus in a more strategic way. I think you guys have done a great job when it comes to things like recreation and so forth, but you're only doing half a job at this very strategic location. There are 400 jobs there right now. There's probably going to be 2,000 on the hospital campus and another 2,000 visitors a day. And particularly for the workers that are going to be there, they've all got to drive to the hospital and to their jobs. And all the visitors to any of the other job sites are going to have to drive. There's no accommodation made for, diversifying the uses of the land. Right now, what I see is 4 soccer fields that are very seldom used, 2 baseball diamonds that are very seldom used, both sets of which I think could be moved elsewhere into neighborhoods and communities or some other spot, maybe the park at 6th Line. But what's missing is a residential function. There are so many workers at the hospital site, or will be at the hospital site, or even in what's there now, who would like to be able to walk to work. There's a lot of clerical people that aren't very high paid. A lot of people that are will be in the hospital that maybe transport patients or work in the kitchen or whatever. They all have to drive. There should be, and there can be, a more strategic approach to the evolution of the site, and that is to add, where those soccer fields and baseball diamonds are, some high-rise residential. There's a need for affordable housing. There's a need for rental housing, and there's lots of room for high-end condominiums on podiums that have retail and other services and so forth. It looks to me like it's just, as a master plan, it's not very strategic in terms of the fullness of the community. It's nice that a lot of stuff has gone, a lot of work has gone into upgrading some of the recreational stuff and a bit of the healthcare stuff as well. But there's another need. I mean, what's more important? Occasional and seldom use of a couple of athletic fields that could be moved into neighborhoods or otherwhere, or people who need to be able to walk and not own a car, walk to work. It's a strategic location, Young and IBR, very important location. And what's happened so far is that it's basically for the most part, kind of a single-use thing, recreational. it needs to develop a little more than that. I'm kind of disappointed that the master plan is not focusing a little bit more on what can be done. I note the survey is focusing, or did focus, basically on recreational things and access to the area by active transportation, such as cycling, which very few people are going to do. It's going to be great that you're going to have a transit line going through there at some point that'll carry maybe 5% of visitors to the site. But it's when the population goes to 85,000, I know a lot of it's going to be at the orbit, but you're going to need another recreation center somewhere else to serve that expanding population. You can't just have everything at the one spot where it is now. It's not necessary, and I would suggest that you honestly look at, take some time and do some investigating on what could be done. I'm sure there's a need for housing. It doesn't matter what you build, whether it be in the orbit or at the campus. If you build it, they will come. There's no problem in getting these places filled, but especially there's a need for affordable housing. We know that in Alcona, for instance, where I am, that where all the kids, when they graduate high school and they get jobs, where are they going to live? They can't afford to buy a house. There's no rental apartments. There's nothing there. There's a need. Even a high rise for senior citizens that may want quicker access to Rizzardo, or even the rec center for some therapy or whatever it is. There's so many opportunities, I think, that are missed by just focusing the whole thing on adding more recreational activities. Comments, please. Feedback, please.
Well, thank you, John. And you made a lot of really good points. We too are really looking to ensure that access to the cultural, institutional, and employment uses that are will be continue to build at this important intersection, as you say, is well served by our transit, our growing transit that we are looking to scale up in the future alongside with our growth. Through the multi-use trails, county is looking at a multi-use trail along Yonge Street as part of their EA process, which would put Stroud, which is about 2.5 kilometers away, within a very comfortable, walking or cycling distance to these lands. So we are, connectivity by alternate means of transportation is certainly something we're looking at. In terms of introducing affordable housing, we all can agree that affordable housing is needed. All forms of affordable and attainable housing is needed. The sort of parameters within which our provincial policies are at don't permit us to create a new sort of residential settlement area. So putting new residential designations would be contrary to the growth plan, because the growth plan it directs that residential development go in and beside where existing communities, complete communities exist today. So that's where
I would assume that it's within the approved urban envelope, built up area. I think you can make that change. Maybe a change in government in June or whenever the provincial election is, but something. Yeah.
So yeah, we are through.
Have a look at it. It's a need that needs to be met.
Yeah, and we are looking. We certainly are. We are looking for opportunities to bring more affordable housing online faster, and through our existing settlement areas that already offer that sort of those complete community functions and land uses. But point well made about the need for affordable housing. Introducing new housing at this intersection isn't part of this exercise and is sort of outside of the parameters of the growth plan, but establishing this community hub and making sure people can access it in an active, non-car reliant way is top of mind for this plan. And that is why there is that focus on on connectivity and active transportation and transit.
I wonder if there's opportunities for land swaps and some deals where you can get a developer to give up some land where you may be able to put a soccer field and so forth in a neighborhood, and you know, change the designation of the land at the campus to allow that developer to build something different, residential, high-rise, you know, on a podium with all the retail services needed, offices and what have you, to make it a more attractive area as a whole. You'll make it alive 24/7. I think some of the landscaping ideas that were put forward are really good. It's great to have pedestrianism and trails and bikeways and so on and so forth, but it's got to be more than that. I mean, you got to have all that plus more.
And well, and two, with the orbit and the sort of the potential there for that type of housing, for that type of built form is, you know, something that we those approvals are in place for, but we're certainly planning for that around transit station, right? So
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, sure. I mean, the orbit's a good plan. I mean, there's all sorts of great things going on there, but it shouldn't be limited to that. I mean, I know we have a target, or you have a target for 85,000 people over in 30 years, but you know, you can accommodate those in a lot of different ways, or you can even exceed it. I'm sure the province wouldn't mind you exceeding it if it's done in a sustainable way. But you know, I mean, if you're going to have 30,000 people or so, or 35,000 at the orbit area, are they not going to want an ice source, a refrigerated ice surface, or a swimming pool, or a soccer field, or a baseball diamond right over there where they can easily access it? You know, I mean, I guess my point is that those two pieces of land, recreational land, the soccer fields and the baseball diamonds, really don't need to be there. They're not that intricately linked with the rec center itself, the building. I mean, sure, they need landscaping equipment and so forth, but that could be done, you know, at another location. Again, what's more important, you know, having those fields being used for you know, athletic activities on rare occasions, or having housing for people who really need to be able to walk to work.
Thank you, John, for those comments. We really appreciate the input, and you know, something perhaps in the future that we could be looking at as we continue to
Please try.
the plan.
Thank you.
Thank you, John.
I'm not seeing any more comments in the chat, and we've gone through the part one of the registrant pre-submitted questions. I guess now's an opportunity if anybody has any last lingering questions.
Go ahead, Mayor Dole.
Thank you. I just want to take the opportunity to thank Mary's team, Galen in particular, Max, for all the enthusiasm and the work that you've done on this project, and thank all of the members of the community for tuning in and for their insightful and well thought out comments. Usually when we work on projects like this, it's hard to get people excited about 2051. I'll be 90. But it's great to see that people are engaged and care enough about their community that they're here with us on a Monday night to share their thoughts. So thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Dolan. Well said. So thank you again to everyone, and if you're seeing no further questions in the chat, I think we can wrap things up for this evening. So just as the next steps to follow our Get Involved page, everything, this recording as well from this evening will be on there, and updates in terms of future reports to council. We'll be putting that on Get Involved, and yeah, we appreciate everybody's time and input, and thank you. Good night, everybody.
Yeah, thanks everyone for coming.